I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, shiny new apples. Apple unveils its latest range of phones. Are they now equipped with 5G speed? Will they usher in the super cycle that Apple is hoping for, even in the midst of the pandemic? We've got it covered. Plus, not to be upstaged, Amazon launches Prime Day deals galore designed for shoppers who still prefer online shopping in the time of COVID. And Facebook shifting stance. Historically a staunch free speech supporter, the social media giant has now cracked down on Holocaust deniers and anti-vax ads. Is it part of a continuing trend? We'll ask the big question also, why now? But first, stocks falling on speculation that recent gains have outpaced prospects for a quick end to the stalemate over fresh economic stimulus. Let's bring in Bloomberg's markets correspondent Abigail Doolittle following all the back and forth. So not good news for future stimulus today. Also some bad news about some of the vaccine trials that have been happening. Break it down for us, Abigail.
You know, Emily, there was really a lot of back and forth, the topsy-turvy day for stocks, up and down, especially for the NASDAQ 100, down 0.5%, up 0.5%, finishing down ever so slightly. So to break a 4-day winning streak for the NASDAQ 100, that was true for the S&P 500 too. And a lot of those factors that you were talking about, disappointment that we don't have more news on stimulus. Also, we had the big rally on Monday around big tech, so a cooling off there. Pfizer, as you mentioned, not continuing right now, a temporary pause for their vaccine, their COVID-19 vaccine study, as somebody fell unexpectedly sick. So this story that we have seen all year here on a micro level of uncertainty causing some really choppy trading. As for the S&P 500, the decline was more significant. So we had the S&P 500 never really getting out of its own way, basically down the whole day, opening slightly higher, closing down 0.6% off the lows. At the lows, down almost 1%. 9 of 11 sectors were lower. The worst sector was the financials, down about 1.9%. And Citigroup, one of the big drags there. They, of course, reported they beat, similar to J.P. Morgan, but Citigroup also talked about how the economic outlook overall is going to be a bit of a challenge. Their costs rose. So you can see that stock really sold off, down 4.8%. So the financials a big drag. However, there were some bright spots, Emily. Moderna was one of them. Novavax was another one. And that actually came on that Pfizer news. So Pfizer pauses their vaccine trial. So you see the competitors popping higher. That's one reason the NASDAQ Biotech Index was the only index to close higher. And then Micron getting a boost from Deutsche Bank, upgrading that stock on demand for DRAM. But for the most part, there was a bit of a risk-off tone on the day, and that was true cross-asset class-wise, too. We saw a pretty decent rally for bonds.
What about Apple? We always see the stock moving a little up, a little down on the day when they make these announcements, unveiling 4 iPhones today, but the stock ending the day down more than 2.5%. What's happening there?
Well, you know, it's interesting. If you put it into the context of yesterday was the real story. The stock up more than 6%, the best day since July 31st, and that was when the stock was up 10% on that strong June report. So today, down more than 2%, but net, when you put these 2 days together going into the event and through the event, up 3.5%. And frankly, the news seems pretty impressive. As you mentioned, those 4 new iPhone 12 powered by 5G phones, lots of different sizes and models, new cameras. The bigger piece, though, that investors care about, of course, the numbers. And this is expected to really boost numbers for 2021. They're expected to sell more than 200 million units, less than 200 million units this year. So that should help numbers move in the right direction.
Okay, Abigail Doolittle, thanks so much for that roundup. Sticking with Apple now, and I bring in Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman, who of course covers Apple for us. And Mark, as always, you report on a number of the announcements that you expected to see leading up to this event. Now it having happened, what are the big highlights to you?
Yeah, Emily, thank you so much for having me. I mean, I guess from a business perspective, the one thing that I don't think is getting enough discussion is they've actually hiked the price quite a bit on these entry-level models. So when they announced the 4 new models, the entry-level iPhone 12, they announced the price as $799. That's with a 6.1-inch screen. If you look year over year from the last year 6.1-inch iPhone, that's a $100 price increase. And they've also added $30 carrier subsidies for Verizon and AT&T, meaning the phone is $130 more expensive if you're buying it on T-Mobile/Sprint. So I think that's an interesting thing to watch when looking at iPhone ASPs over the next few quarters or so.
There are, interestingly, the carriers announcing a whole new slew of deals, trade-in programs for the new iPhones, and of course touting the future of 5G. All of these phones are 5G enabled. Of course, we need the networks and the carriers to step up to improve their 5G networks. We saw the CEO of Verizon on stage with Tim Cook today. How much does the network matter when it comes to consumers and people who pay up for these new phones actually getting to see the benefit of a 5G network?
I mean, Emily, I was sort of surprised, and we've gone to all of these events together, that Apple went all in on talking about 5G technology. I mean, as you know very well, this is really the first time that they've gone all in on discussing a network technology. Last time around when they did the iPhone, it was the iPhone 5 in 2012 with 4G LTE, they barely mentioned 4G. When they had that 4G improvement with some other models and 3G improvements, they really didn't discuss it. The iPhone 3G, when they announced it, obviously had 3G in the name, but 3G was already all over the world. 5G is still in its infancy. I think it's hard to argue otherwise. So I thought it was surprising, but they did, talk the talk. They backed it up. They took us into the labs, and they really explained how they would be ready for 5G. So I think it's up to consumers to see when they start opening these things if that's really the reality. Personally, I think it's going to be a while till you see the real true effects.
Right. We'll see if these companies, these carriers can make good on their promises over the next 6 months to improve the network. Let's talk about the tech enhancements, though. And, in addition to 5G technology, what is driving that price increase? We are seeing a big design change. As you've reported, it's the biggest design change in 3 years. New camera technology, new video technology. Talk to us about what's actually in these phones, that would make a consumer want to pay up for something new.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you look at that $100 to $130 price increase on the regular 12 models, not the Pro ones, one of the big drivers there is the new screen. So this is the first time, in addition to doing 4 models simultaneously, that they're doing OLED screens across the board. So when they did the first OLED screen in 2017 with the iPhone 10, that was one phone. Last year, they only had it on 2 phones. Now they have it on 4 phones. And those screens could cost 2, 3, or even 4 times as much as the older LCD screens. So that's why you're seeing an increase there. And that would be a reason to upgrade alone for most people. I think the 50% faster processor is a big leap, specifically with that A14 chip. And the camera improvements you're seeing across the board, but specifically on that iPhone 12 Pro Max, I think it's going to be interesting to a lot of people.
Now, you've been doing a lot of reporting on the supply chain and how Apple has adapted in the time of COVID. We know that the launch events now have been staggered. We would have seen these iPhones normally unveiled in September. Now, here we are in October. How are you expecting that to impact sales, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, given that there are a lot of people struggling, but we're also more connected and we need our devices more than ever before. So perhaps that will encourage more people to make that leap.
So what you're seeing is on some models, it's about a 1-month delay. So on the iPhone 12 and iPhone 12 Pro, that's the 6.1-inch screen phones, it's 1 month. The iPhone 12 mini and the iPhone 12 Pro Max, those come out in mid-November, actually 30 days from today. Believe me, I'm counting down. That's that makes it a 2-month delay. So I think that basically slices their holiday sales in half for 2 of those models. But we'll see if interest in the regular 12 Pro and the regular iPhone 12 could make up for that at least some.
All right. And of course, there's also a new HomePod mini smart speaker also unveiled today. In addition to these 4 new iPhones, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, as always, thanks so much for your reporting on this. Coming up, we're going to continue talking about Apple's product launch. We'll be speaking with Carolina Milanesi of Creative Strategies for her take on all of the things we just discussed. That's next. This is Bloomberg. More now on Apple, the tech giant unveiling its latest range of iPhones, a product line that Wall Street expects will kick off a new cycle of sales growth for the world's largest technology company. I want to bring in Carolina Milanesi of Creative Strategies. Carolina, normally I'm talking to you on the balcony overlooking the Steve Jobs Theater after these events, but all of this happening virtually now, including the event itself. Given the time we are in, we're in the middle of a pandemic, obviously a recession, but a new range of iPhones packed with new technology. How big do you think the super cycle is going to be?
It's interesting, right? If you look at everything that comes with the new devices, they kind of have a perfect storm. They have the new design, including colors and form factor. They have a new technology and a stronger camera, which is still one of the biggest selling points for smartphone across the board. And yet we are in an economic downturn, but also I think from a consumer perspective, there's just uncertainty across the board, especially in the US. And so it's really hard to judge. Clearly, the carriers are really hungry to get people on 5G. And so we've seen some of the bundles and the aggressive price this morning during the event with Verizon. Others will follow. Hard to call it, but they have a lot of the things that consumers are interested in. The question is, where is my money going? And I think that the other part for Apple is that they have more products this year than they had in previous years as well, as far as where they want consumers to spend money. We're still waiting for the Max as well this year.
Right. Exactly. Waiting potentially for new Macs with that Apple designed chips. As you alluded to, 4 new iPhones, which is, I believe, more than they've ever unveiled at one time. Also the iPhone 12 mini, which is sort of between the iPhone SE and the current iPhone 11 in size. How does this larger family now impact consumer choice?
I think you have the strong new portfolio with 5G, but as you were discussing with Mark earlier, not everybody is ready for 5G, both from a consumer perspective and from a market perspective. 5G is not rolled out everywhere in the same way. And so Apple keeping the SE, the 11 and the 10R in the lineup is offering choice. And I think that that's what matters is giving the opportunity to consumers to get the price point that is right for them, but knowing also that through the software upgrade, they're not getting a compromised experience, if you like.
So let's talk a little bit about the camera technology. Obviously, the camera, or in this case, cameras, because there are multiple cameras on these new phones, are one of the main reasons people buy an iPhone at all. The new camera technology enables you to take better pictures in lower light. They were also playing up camera and video features for pros. How big of a driver do you think that will be?
It is always a big driver. What has been interesting this year, though, is that Apple is returned to a differentiated approach for the Pro family. And so some of the features that are linked to both still camera and video are only delivered on the Max, on the biggest form factor, which is interesting because, not everybody wants the larger form factor, and we're returning to where the iPhone 6 Plus was, where, if you wanted the latest technology, you had to go for the bigger form factor. I think Apple is playing a little bit with, Pro features. How much are people willing to give up, a DSLR experience for a phone versus the people that think that's just too much for them? And I think that's the balance, right? Is trying to find enough feature set for the camera that makes my shot better, not necessarily taking a picture more complicated, but where is that line that blurs when, as a pro, I want a real camera versus a phone?
Now, what about the new HomePod mini speaker? Apple, the HomePod certainly hasn't taken huge market share in smart speakers, but it certainly could. There are new capabilities in terms of integrating with your iPhone and sensing your iPhone. when it's close enough. Do you think that this will, could be the product upgrade that it needs to take off?
I think the price point is super aggressive. $99 is definitely something that is going to give people a reason to at least check it out. I think that if the quality of the sound stays in parity with the original HomePod or close to it, it's definitely a great experience. I think that Apple is being quite interestingly pointing at the value of the connected home and your smart home being in the iPhone, and then the iPhone connecting smartly to other devices within your home, and HomePod Mini being one of those. Even how they talked about the sound around your television, or the new intercom that allows you to play a message even from your car through CarPlay to both the HomePod Mini, but also AirPods. It's quite fascinating how the different approach that Apple has compared, say, to an Amazon, where you don't have a phone, to home Alexa as such. And Apple is putting all the strength that they have in the product that they sell most and best, which is the iPhone.
Now, it seems like a footnote, but another big change is that Apple is not going to be including headphones and power chargers in the box anymore. And the phone is, it's a pricey phone. Yes. Tim Cook sold it as an environmental, that there's an environmental motivation for this. I'm sure it does bring down that base cost of the phone as well. But what do you make of it?
Consumers are never happy when you take something away from them and you don't give them, a discount or something that they can point at as like, okay, I get this. But the reality is that a lot of people are upgrading from a previous iPhone or might have an iPad already in the home. So the charger is something that you already have. And so that shouldn't really be a problem. And as far as the headset, both a combination of AirPods success together with people that prefer an over-the-ear headset, I really don't see a lot of people using the out-of-the-box headset. So I think it's more a perception issue, but not necessarily a real point of contention with consumers.
All right, so much to continue to follow and cover, and of course we'll be watching how those new iPhones sell out of the gate. Carolina Milanesi of Creative Strategies, thanks so much. Always good to have you here on the show. Coming up, Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett faces senators' tough questions this afternoon. We will have the very latest next. This is Bloomberg.
Again, you're asking me for a view on that particular case, and Justice Ginsburg herself gave the most famous articulation of the principle that constrains me from doing so, which is no hints, forecasts, or previews. So I can't express a view on precedent or on how I would decide any question that was provoked by the application of that precedent to a later case.
But did Ruth Bader Ginsburg follow her own rule? That's the question. Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett earlier today, during her first round of questioning in front of the Senate, she opted not to weigh in on topics like abortion, the Affordable Care Act, potential election challenges, and gun rights, citing the late RBG. With us for a recap and what to expect tomorrow, Bloomberg's Greg Stohr covering all things Supreme Court. Greg, what were the highlights today in terms of what she did and did not say?
Well, she really resisted Democratic attempts to cast her as somebody who would say vote to overturn the Affordable Care Act or necessarily would vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. She said she hadn't made up her mind about issues that hadn't come before her. She said she refused to disqualify herself from presidential election cases that might come before her, although she said she would look at those very closely. And generally, she has avoided any major slip-ups that might derail her nomination.
So what are we expecting tomorrow and the rest of the week?
We'll have another day of questions tomorrow, and we'll have more this evening, too, including questions from Vice Presidential nominee Kamala Harris. So the Democrats will continue to go after her. There are still a couple of topics they haven't talked about, like, for example, her presence at the White House at what seems to be a super spreader event for the coronavirus that may have been around the time that President Trump became sick. That they haven't asked about that at all. There could be some fireworks over that. Democrats are just going to keep trying to press her, make some political points, especially about health care, knowing that they don't have the votes to actually stop her from getting on the Supreme Court.
Now, we know whoever fills this seat will have an impact on major issues for, potentially generations to come. One of those issues is technology. There are some tech cases coming up on the docket. What are the most impactful or potentially impactful cases that could pertain to the tech industry coming up?
Well, yeah, one case to watch is the case that the court just heard arguments in last week, the Google Oracle case, where there are only 8 justices for that case. That's the case where Oracle says Google, in creating the Android operating system, violated Oracle's copyrights, and it's a multi-billion-dollar suit. If the 8 justices are divided 4-4 in that case, and it wasn't clear how the case was coming out, they might re-argue that case with her as the one who would cast the deciding vote. So that's one case to watch for. And then more long-term, just we're thinking about, she would be the youngest justice on the court. That doesn't necessarily make her the most tech-savvy justice, but might give her a little bit of an edge on tech cases over some of the older justices who are less used to the newer technologies.
Interesting. And she would be one of the youngest justices of all time. Bloomberg's Greg Stohr in Washington. Thank you so much. You can catch minute-by-minute coverage of the hearing by going to TLive Go on the Bloomberg terminal. You'll also see some of Greg's commentary there. Coming up, Twitter and Facebook both making sweeping product changes to curb the spread of misinformation ahead of the election. We're going to speak to Jim Steyer, founder and CEO of Common Sense Media, about the role of social media in contentious U.S. politics next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. The role of social media in our lives has become an even hotter, more controversial topic as the U.S. nears a critical election just weeks away. Platforms like Twitter and Facebook have been under fire over the spread of misinformation and blamed for undermining democracy. Joining us now for more, Common Sense Media founder and CEO Jim Steyer, who's also out with a new book titled Which Side of History, which explores the impact of technology on our social well-being and democracy. The book features essays from prominent tech voices like Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, Sal Khan of Khan Academy, Tristan Harris of the Center for Humane Technology. Jim, always good to have you with us. You have been raising the alarm about the responsibilities of these tech platforms for some time now, and I know this is a bit of a rhetorical question, but at this point, which side of history do you think these platforms will be on?
It's a great question, actually, Emily, and it is the question they have to answer, because we are at an existential point in our society in terms of our democracy. We can see it in the 2020 election and the stories we've just been doing about misinformation in the election, but also in terms of the impact on your kids and my kids and on all of our lives. So this is a very fundamental question that I think the Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, Jack Dorsey's, Tim Cook's, and everyone else have to answer. Which side of history do they want to be on? And how do they shape the next generation of young people, our kids and your kids, but our society? These are profound questions, and that's exactly what the book is about.
Let's start with Facebook. You wrote about Section 230 and holding platforms, tech platforms, accountable. In recent days, we've seen Facebook crack down on Holocaust deniers, on anti-vax ads. They've banned QAnon. Is it enough or too little too late?
Basically, too little, too late. You took the words right out of my mouth, Emily. I mean, honestly, these guys participated in the hacking of the 2016 election by the Russian government. Think about that. They actually permitted their platform to be used by a foreign adversary to hack our election, also in 2018. So now when they're belatedly coming out and saying, okay, we're going to ban Holocaust deniers, are you kidding me? They should have done this years ago. But you raised the important question of Section 230. What is the liability for the major tech companies and the social media platforms in particular for misinformation, disinformation, and falsehoods? They have to be held accountable. We're going to have to redo Section 230. And this is a moment of great reckoning that's going to culminate in this election in a few weeks.
So saying they permitted it is different than they failed to prevent it. And I'm sure that's what Facebook would argue in response to your point there. But, you know, what kind of changes are required? I mean, should tech companies be broken up? Do we need government regulation? You know, what, a different business model, a subscription business model?
All of the above. All of the above. Clearly, we have major antitrust issues that are going to come to the fore. So these have all been pushed below the radar a little, Emily, not that far. They're emerging. So we're going to clearly have big antitrust issues. In the case of Facebook, you know, we've discussed this before. We would strongly urge at Common Sense that they be forced to divest themselves of Instagram and WhatsApp. But you're also going to see major liability issues for the content that they're publishing on their platforms. I mean, we're on a channel right now where you have great restrictions about what you're allowed to publish, just like all other cable news platforms do. But the tech industry has no regulation. So we need regulation, we need thoughtful antitrust provisions, and we need a basic public effort and movement, I think, to say to the major tech companies, which side of history do you want to be on? Because your kids are going to judge you and history is watching. And whether it's Facebook, whether it's Google, whether it's the other big companies, they're going to have to respond to these questions. And with the election of 2020, all of these issues are going to be on the table.
Now, you and Common Sense have been big drivers of the Stop Hate for Profit campaign. You've got hundreds of advertisers on board to boycott Facebook the month of July. Many of those advertisers have come back, and I'm curious if you think that campaign will actually have long-lasting implications. Are you still talking with advertisers? Do you think there's more boycotts to come? Because if they don't take a stand in that way, you know, for an ongoing period of time, will Facebook get the point?
The great point, Emily. And the truth is this, the belated efforts that you just mentioned from Facebook about Holocaust deniers, et cetera, that's a result of Stop Hate for Profit, period, full stop. We could stop and congratulate ourselves for forcing them to do that. They should have done it years ago, by the way, but they're doing it now because of the Stop Hate for Profit movement and the advertiser boycott. Do we think this is going to continue? Absolutely. I actually think that people across the political spectrum are fed up with some of this stuff. I mean, you even saw Donald Trump last week come out and say that Section 230 should be repealed. It was for different reasons than most people have called for the repeal or overhaul of Section 230. But it reflected the fact that there is a broad assessment among the public on all sides of the political aisle that we need a regulated environment, that we need to treat the tech companies as the publishers that they are. And the key is going to be a thoughtful, common sense regulatory structure. And business has to weigh in that, the tech industry. And you mentioned my friend Mark Benioff, people like Mark Benioff or the folks at Microsoft or Apple. They've been very important in privacy regulation here in California and around the United States. So we're going to need tech leaders to step up too and say, this is what we believe in. I mean, we've had sort of a free-for-all Wild West environment for the past decade or more. That's going to change. The question is, how do we regulate these companies? And as I said again, which side of history will they be on? The public is watching. So are you and my kids.
Now, the consequences, potential consequences are huge. We have an election at stake. Today, the California Republican Party admitted to placing misleading ballot boxes around the state and said they would continue to do so. So having accurate information about the election is so critically important. I mean, how concerned are you that this upcoming election, that we are not ready, that this election could be undermined once again?
Well, I mean, yeah, as you said, once again, because Emily, the 2016 election was undermined by our major foreign advocacy, Russia, with the complicity of a certain political party. So am I concerned? Absolutely. One of the biggest critiques the Stop Hate for Profit movement has said about Facebook and Instagram is that they permitted voter suppression. There were a ton of false and misleading efforts aimed at African-American voters, low-income voters, et cetera, trying to basically suppress the vote. As a Stanford con law professor, I'm shocked and outraged that we're worrying about that in 2020, but it's the reality. So here's the fundamental point here is that tech companies need to be part of American democracy. They need to promote fair and good rules for all sides of the aisle. They don't need to take a stance. They just need to do fair and common sense behavior. But we're going to see a major regulatory regime. We're going to be talking this on your very fine show in 2021, Emily, no question, because the stuff has hit the fan, if you will. And the election is at stake. Our democracy is at stake. Our kids' lives are at stake. These are very important issues. And what I tried to do with this book was get some of the smartest people in the world to weigh in on the various aspects. But at the end of the day, it's really up to you and me and our audience to say, this is the kind of society, this is the kind of democracy we want. And we all really do want to be on the right side of history. So we need to hold the tech industry accountable so that they will be as well.
I appreciate you censoring your words there, Jim, because as you know, we can't just say whatever we want on cable television.
That's true.
We talk a lot about Facebook. You mentioned Apple, you mentioned Google.
Yep.
There are other companies where we could lay some blame here. Apple makes a lot of money on in-app purchases and virtual items that you buy in games. There's Google as well, and of course YouTube. What are some of the responsibilities of these other major platforms, or where do you see them shirking those responsibilities?
Well, no, Emily, it's a great question. And it's very important for our audience to remember that the tech industry is not monolithic. For example, when we passed the California Privacy Act in 2018, the landmark law of the land on privacy in the US, we split the tech industry. So Apple, Salesforce, Microsoft came along, and then basically Facebook and Google had to agree at the end of the day. So it's not a monolithic industry. But these are very profound questions about our democratic institutions, about your kids and my kids, and the impact that technology and screen time and content can have on them. These are really, really important questions for all of us to discuss. And they go to the essence of corporate responsibility. They go to the essence of what is the role of our government in a society where we respect freedom of expression, but we also have other norms that matter. And so we are in the middle, and this program is in the middle of an incredibly important discussion about the impact of technology in our society, the specific companies, technology more broadly, and also our kids' future. I mean, what bigger issues do we all face other than who's going to be the next president of the United States? So it's a great time to have this discussion. It's a great time to have Which Side of History Out as a book. And everybody who's listening to this program has a stake in the outcome.
All right, Jim Steyer out with a new book today, Which Side of History. Jim, always good to have you here on the show. Jim Steyer, the CEO of Common Sense Media. Check out the book, Which Side of History, out now. All right, coming up, Amazon Prime Day kicks off in what many say will be a pandemic-driven year of record spending. This due to customers still spooked by in-person shopping and an ongoing pandemic. We'll get one analyst's view next. This is Bloomberg. Amazon's two-day Prime Day sale is underway. It's expected to give the world's largest e-commerce company an early advantage over brick-and-mortar rivals this holiday season. Michael Pachter, analyst and managing director at Wedbush, joins us now for a closer look. So, Michael, obviously we are in unprecedented times. Will this be a Prime Day like no other?
Some people call it Prime Day. I'm calling it Tuesday. Amazon sales are ridiculous. And, if you actually just take their guidance number and kind of extrapolate the gross merchandise value, they're doing about $1.25 billion a day in normal sales all quarter. And I think I saw eMarketer was talking about, bumping up close to 10 billion in the 2 days. So yeah, sure, sales are up 5x for Prime Day. Who cares? What we're actually hearing from the channel is that retailers or vendors are having trouble getting space in Amazon fulfillment centers, and particularly big merchandise, furniture, big stuff. And Amazon's turning stuff away because demand is so high for just everyday staples, groceries, everything else. So yes, I think eMarketer's right. It'll be 5 billion a day instead of 1.25 billion. But that's a rounding error when you're talking about a $90 billion quarter. And this is just the beginning. They've convinced us all we need to shop there all the time. I trust their produce and meats now. I buy perishables on Amazon. I'm not sure I'm ever going back to the grocery store. So, they won us over. Prime Day was intended to win over new Prime customers. They've already got everybody. So this is just selling their customer base a little bit more.
Michael, I've been interviewing you now for 10 years, and I always love your candor. How will or how do you expect Amazon to stand out from other big, normally booming holiday retailers, whether it is Target or Walmart, as we get into the holiday season?
The thing that's probably surprised me the most is how well Walmart's done and how well Target's done. Best Buy, Bed Bath & Beyond, guys who tended to really lag on online sales have figured it out. And to their credit, Walmart bought Jet and decided that they were going to make an effort to compete with Amazon a couple of years ago. Everybody's figuring it out. You have these upstarts like crappy little Overstock, which we cover, that has seen sales double, and more than double. And Wayfair, which we cover, has just killed it. So, I think the truth is that where 5 years ago I thought Amazon was going to be the only online retailer and have 10% of all retail sales, I now think that they're going to have 10% of all retail sales, and the rest of the big box retailers are going to capture 10 or 20. And we're just seeing brick and mortar suffering and multi-channel, omni-channel guys doing pretty well. Mom and pops are getting squeezed, and we're just not going to the mall anymore.
Well, who's also getting squeezed is Whole Foods. And we can't forget that Jeff Bezos made a huge bet to buy Whole Foods. And you yourself said you may never go back to the grocery store. The traffic in Whole Foods, certainly down. And in general, sales not what certainly Amazon had expected them to be. How much of a drag do you think that would be overall?
I have an anecdote about that. A Whole Foods market opened in my neighborhood. I'm in Long Beach on October 23rd. So it's literally been open for a year. It's turning 1 year. And I asked Amazon at the time, were they going to fulfill Amazon, Fresh from that store? And they said, no, that store wasn't equipped. And I said, that store is not equipped. Which store is? And they said, we haven't built it yet. So part of the problem with Whole Foods is that it's a conventional grocer, and it really didn't have, the capability to have trucks shuttling in and out of there 24/7. And I think Amazon's got to reinvent the refrigerated distribution center, and they're doing it because of COVID. So COVID's accelerated that move. Whole Foods probably is going to be a loss leader for them. Probably going to just be a convenience store for Prime, Visa card holders to go in and get 5% cash back. But I don't think that business is going to thrive. I think that Amazon Fresh is going to thrive.
Interesting. So the delivery arm, basically.
Yes. And again, Amazon's figured it out. I remember trying to buy Diet Werner's soda on Amazon about a year ago, and a 6-pack was, $5 and a $12 delivery charge. So I didn't do it. And now I buy, 24 packs of bubbly for $6, and it's free delivery. They figured it out. So, again, because of the frequency of delivery and the volume of delivery to every Prime member's household, they are figuring out how to bundle stuff. We're getting literally 4 or 5 packages a day. I used to laugh at people who got 3 packages a week, and we're literally getting everything on Amazon. I think a lot of Prime members are. Certainly people above median income have found this super convenient, and people old who are afraid of dying have found this super convenient. So I never leave the house. You can see.
Well, if I want a glass of bubbly, I know where to find it. Michael Pachter, analyst at Wedbush Securities. Always good to have you here on the show. Thank you. All right. coming up. We're going to be talking about Verizon. CEO Hans Vestberg on Bloomberg Television earlier today touting their new 5G network. That's coming up. This is Bloomberg. U.S. carriers have spent billions of dollars upgrading their networks with 5G wireless technology, promising 10 times faster speeds than current connections. Verizon today became the third carrier to boast about having nationwide 5G coverage. CEO Hans Vestberg spoke with Bloomberg following the announcement at Apple's iPhone unveiling.
I've been waiting for this moment all the year. I told the market that we're going to launch nationwide at the right commercial moment. This is the right commercial moment. We have the nationwide, we have the ultra-wideband, and we have the best 4G network. This is something we want to give our customers. So this is an exciting time for us. This has been a work in years together with our partners to get where we are, and we have been driving the ecosystem in front of us. And some think that we're late on 5G. I would say we're 2 years ahead of the plans that were 5 years ago, where 5G should be today. So I think we have pushed the envelope here in the United States, and we're very proud of it.
It's interesting that Verizon and AT&T are actually offering, sort of amid this hope for a huge upgrade cycle, free access to these phones if, of course, you go on to the more unlimited provisions that you offer in terms of access. I'm interested in who's going to be buying these phones. As Taylor mentioned, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of an economic crisis as well, Hans. How affordable, how realistic is the super cycle amidst Apple's new phone?
That's, of course, we are in a very tough situation with the pandemic and economical downturn and all of that. But clearly, we have seen a lot of sort of excitement around the 5G phone from Apple. So we're going to see. We are geared up to receive all the demand there is and seeing that the network is perfect for actually using it. And that's what we're going to see the next couple of weeks here when the offering is coming out and the phones can be delivered. But I have personally, at least, I believe that many people would really would love to get the 5G phone from Apple on the Verizon network.
And so going forward here, Hans, in terms of building out not only 5G capabilities, but of course just the general capabilities that Verizon needs to keep this increasing number of customers happy, what type of CapEx spend increase, if any, should investors expect to see?
If you look what we did in the beginning of the year, when we came into the pandemic, I think the second week when it started hitting in the US, we decided to increase the capex guidance for this year. We thought it was the right thing to invest more in the market, and we didn't know how the usage would be on a wireless network, so that's why we did it. Now the network has held up very well, but we still continue to deploy the capital that we decided to increase in the beginning of the year. We think it's right for the nation, it's right for our customers. So that's why then we will come back, what we'll have a guidance for the next years to come, but right now we have increased our guidance that we did in the beginning of the year.
Can you give us a sense of how you will fund via debt, perhaps, to make those investments?
I think if you look at our balance sheet, I mean, remember, I'm only 2 weeks out from my earnings call, but when we had our second quarter reporting, we, for the first time, hit the financial metrics pre-Vodafone acquisition on our balance sheet. A terrific job of our treasury team over the years, coming down to around 2 times our EBITDA. That's just in net debt. That's just fantastic. At the same time, in this quarter, we offered and we did our second green bond for $1 billion. Continue to think about the climate change in the country, and one of few companies in the telecom sector actually investing our debt into climate change. So, and this is the second one, because the first one we did 2019, and we're already exhausted the first billion, and now we're going to the second billion. So I have to say my treasury team is doing great work in order to position our balance sheet as strong as they need to be.
Hans, before you joined Verizon, when you're on the tech side of Verizon, then becoming the CEO. Prior to that, of course, we go back when you used to be leading Ericsson, a company that is all about infrastructure at its very heart and all about providing global access. It was big in China, for example. You know US markets versus the rest of the world. How much do you think the US is competitive with its 5G rollout versus other China? Is it neck and neck? Can it make up some of the lost ground, do you think?
US is actually leading and has been done that for a long time. I mean, we were first with the 5G home, we were first with 5G mobile edge compute, we were first with a 5G commercial 5G smartphone, and we see the deployments are going on in the US and now with the iPhone. I think we're clearly leading in the 5G world, and I'm proud of what we have done in Verizon, but also the rest of the industry is doing there. I mean, there's a lot of other companies in the ecosystem that are doing their work. So I feel good about it, and I think we're in the lead.
Hans Vestberg, CEO of Verizon, there earlier on Bloomberg Markets. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Bloomberg Daybreak Australia is next. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.